We have so much PC hardware news to talk about today. We have the Nvidia app itself can apparently reduce your performance by up to 15% as tested by Tom's Hardware, but there's a major caveat to this data set we'll talk about in a minute. We also have Nvidia GeForce basically confirming we'll find out about the next graphics cards at CES on January 6th, although it's not officially mentioned in the press release regarding that keynote speech. We also have a beautiful looking Witcher 4 cinematic trailer, which begins with the line that it was rendered on an unannounced Nvidia GeForce RTX GPU, which, oh, what's that? Definitely the 50 series incoming, although don't read too much into these graphics here. However, we have videocards.com finding references to a whole bunch of new GPU information for the 50 series on a board partner's website, in this case Zotac. And we have WCCF Tech claiming some information from their sources about the 50 series, including the 5060 Ti getting 16 gigabytes, while the 5060 will only be 8. And the 5070 Ti, some additional information about that, including VRAM capacity and power consumption. However, Copite 7 Kimi seems less sure about the 350 watt configuration. We also have videocards.com with some information about Power Color soon launching an RX 8000 Reaper series GPUs. We've got some meta-analysis from 3D Center aggregating data regarding the B580 launch. A lot of people seem excited about that card, although can you actually get one? We have John Carmack with some interesting speculation about GPUs not requiring CPUs in the future. And then we have some Nintendo Switch 2 hardware leaks. Let's circle back around to the beginning. So what's this about the Nvidia app lowering your gaming performance up to 15%? Well, okay, so careful with this. I think this needs some additional testing. First of all, note up to, because that makes it more dramatic. So not in all cases. Second of all, Tom's Hardware did test something useful, but they didn't test everything that I think needs to be tested to get a full picture of what's happening here. I only just saw this article, so I haven't had any time to do any of my own testing. I'm not sure if I will. Perhaps I will. We'll see. But here's what they're showing. With the Nvidia app not just installed, but open, and that's the key word, they're showing some sometimes fairly massive reductions in performance versus no app. Okay, you can see it at medium settings and ultra settings in Assassin's Creed Mirage. They pull up some other games like Baldur's Gate 3, which shows less dramatic of a difference, but it is a performance reduction. Black Myth Wukong, again, shows a performance reduction, although not as massive, right? And some games not showing much, if any, difference. But again, here is the key detail. What did Tom's Hardware actually test? So read this sentence carefully. We see everywhere else not having the Nvidia app installed, or at least not running, though we didn't check that scenario. Improved performance. So right there, we didn't check that scenario. So they never checked the scenario of having the app installed, but not actually running. In other words, you might install the Nvidia app and just open it to update drivers or change certain display settings. But when you're actually playing a game, you might not have the app actually running. Additionally, something they didn't mention here, but I think would be worth looking into, is whether or not this is related to enabling the overlay for the Nvidia app. So I think the additional things that I would like to see tested here, maybe I'll have time to do it myself, but I can't guarantee it, I'm fairly busy this week, is, again, what if you have the app installed but closed? What if you have the app installed and with the overlay turned off versus the overlay turned on? Those would be additional things I'd like to see. But in general, I'll definitely say that opening the app, reducing your performance this dramatically seems not to be a good look, okay? That's certainly not good. And I would imagine there's probably some inefficiency there that could be fixed. But again, this isn't a massive data set, and like I said, other combos I think need to be tested before we run too far with any of this. But just kind of getting the word out there about this, all my sources will be in the video description if you want to take a closer look. Now, what was this about Nvidia basically confirming we'll find out about the 50 series at CES on January 6th? Well, we have a post on X from Nvidia GeForce account. Notice it's the GeForce accounts, not just the Nvidia account. That's significant because that is the gaming graphics card division, as opposed to just Nvidia's company, which is currently more AI focused than it is gaming focused, because that's where the money's at. Now, they're saying it all starts now. Celebrate 25 years of GeForce, play along and join our GeForce LAN 50, watch our NVIDIA keynote at CES 2025, January 6th, 25. Basically, they are making it very clear that the keynote on January 6th will have something to do with GeForce. Also, this playing along a live stream for 50 hours ends at that keynote, so it would make a lot of sense for that to be hyping up the 50 series, and then we get the 50 series announcement. Now, that being said, if you actually read the press release NVIDIA issued regarding their keynote on January 6th, it's all very AI focused and leather jacket focused. It's less so, it did not mention anything about gaming cards. So to be clear, it mentions more about leather jackets than it does gaming cards. But that being said, if the whole point is to announce the cards at the event, they wouldn't want to announce it in the press release regarding the event. That kind of spoils it. You see what I'm saying? But what I would say is what we should expect is an AI-focused keynote that probably ends with, and here's what AI is doing in GeForce, here's the new 50 series. Now, which cards should we expect? More on that in just a minute, because I want to give one more piece of evidence that we're probably about to find out about the 50 series. This is the Witcher 4 cinematic reveal trailer. It says that this is a cinematic trailer pre-rendered in Unreal Engine 5 on an unannounced NVIDIA GeForce RTX GPU. Now, there's a few really important things to note about this. First of all, this is pre-rendered. So if you think this is confirmation that actual gameplay is going to look like this at 60 FPS in real time on a 5090, that is not at all what this is confirming. So let's be 100% clear on that. The wording here is pre-rendered. It's pre-rendered. Meaning you probably could have pre-rendered this on an RTX 3060 if it doesn't have to run in real time. It would just take longer to render, I guess, as long as you have enough VRAM capacity to compute the render. But anyway, whatever. The point is, this is not saying that this is what gameplay on a 5090 looks like, because this is not gameplay. This is pre-rendered. Second thing I want to mention is, so why mention this at all or do this at all? Well, clearly it's obviously intentional marketing hype. Referencing an unannounced GeForce RTX GPU means NVIDIA is now currently collaborating with CD Projekt Red to hype up this unannounced RTX GPU, right? So this is official NVIDIA hype trailer, basically. Also, one more thing is the fact that they were able to pre-render this on an unannounced RTX GPU would mean that that GPU is at least up and running, available at CD Projekt Red with drivers working well enough in Unreal Engine 5 to pre-render this video. So that does mean that RTX, probably 5090, I would guess, is out in the wild. At least CD Projekt Red has it in their hands, which would mean you would expect board partners to have it in their hands. And again, all of this is lining up with January 6th, finding out about these and them launching and being available shortly afterwards. Now, which exact cards and what other information do we have on that? So at videocards.com, they did a little bit of web sleuthing through Google search tools, because web crawlers, can access, you can search within a certain domain for certain information, and it can pull up information that's not necessarily supposed to be public facing yet, which seems to be what VideoCards did, searching for 50 series information at various board partners and pulled it up from Zotac. So there are references to the 5090, the 5080, the 5090D, GDDR7 memory, specifically in 32 gigabyte capacities. And I believe as well they've seen references of the 5070 Ti and 5070. Going to the actual website, you can even pull up, at least at the time Zotac saw this, and it may be taken down shortly afterwards, You can even search for the 5090, 5090D, 5080, 5070 Ti, and 5070. Now, this is not just cut off before there's a 5060 listed. There is no 5060 or 5060 Ti listed at this point, which means that if we get an announcement at CES, it would likely be no more than these cards. It could potentially even be fewer than these, but if Zotac is ready to go with 5070, 5070 Ti, 5080, 5090, 5090D, then you would expect those to be the ones at the January 6th announcement. So that's probably what's happening here. Additionally, Videocards.com is noticing that there have been added these filters. Memory type GDDR7. Why would that need to be added to their graphics cards page? Because the 50 series clearly uses GDDR7. At least some of them must. Also note that there is now a 32 gigabyte memory capacity sorting, which didn't used to be there. It used to just be 12, 16, and 24. Why would they need 32? If the 5090 uses 32, which has been the rumor. Also note the absence of the listing of a 5080D. There had been rumors that there might have been a 5080D. The fact that there's not, but there is a 5090D, indicates that the 5080 itself probably gets around whatever export restrictions are on the Chinese on the cards to China from the U.S. government restrictions on all that, and that's why we have the 5090D. Still unclear exactly how the 5090 can be cut down to meet those requirements and still be a 5090. I had some speculation on that in a previous video. But what can we actually expect from these cards? Well, WCCF Tech is claiming their own information regarding a couple of these. Now, I will mention regarding that oftentimes WCCF Tech is reporting on other sources, like maybe Copite 7 Kimi, something like that. However, in this particular leak, and their one about their 5060 and 5060 Ti, they're claiming their own sources. So that would be, someone somewhere either at a board partner or potentially even within Nvidia. But again, that means that this is not a. I would take this with a grain of salt. So they're claiming that the 5070 Ti will not just be 16 gigabytes VRAM capacity, but also have GDDR7 memory. And go at 350 watts total board power. Now, it's important to note that Copite 7 Kimi, who is one of our better known and with a better track record leakers on Twitter regarding GPU hardware, says that's why I'm not in a hurry to draw conclusions. The latest data shows 285 watts. However, 350 watts is also one of the configs. So it's possible that this 350 watt is maybe a partner card. Maybe we're getting that information from a board partner, and the board partner is choosing to run at a higher power target in order to get more performance. A lot of times the beefier coolers, that's what you get from the AIB cards. So that could be what's going on here. But Copite is saying more like 285 watts on that. Also, WCCF Tech is claiming information on the 5060 and the 5060 Ti. The 5060 apparently with only 8 gigabytes still, although it is GDDR7, and the 5060 Ti with 16. Now, I will say that at this point in time, I am less trusting the 5060 series information to be accurate than I am with the 70 class. Part of that isn't necessarily about sources. It's just about that the further you are from the launch of a product, the more things may change before it actually launches. And notice again that on Zotac's website, there's no 5060 or 5060 Ti listings. All of the main rumors we've been seeing have been focusing on the 70, 80, and 90 class cards. So it's likely the 60 class cards are coming much later, which means, like I said, that even if there is information out there right now, and even if it is legitimately sourced, it also has more potential to change before launch if it's further from launch. Hopefully I'm kind of clear on that. So again, this is WCCF Tech claiming their own sources on this. Now, I think a lot of people would be extremely disappointed by an 8 gigabyte 5060. Now, perhaps if it cost a low enough cost. If it came in at $200, maybe we'll be happy. But if it comes in at like $350 with 8 gigabytes, I think a lot of people would be extremely disappointed. Might still be useful for like esports gamers who turn down graphic settings anyway. But for people trying to play the latest single-player games, even at 1080p resolution, 8 gigabytes is often not enough. And if a 5060 is stronger than a 4060, it's likely strong enough to where it could have run like the ultra settings and ultra textures at 1080p at least if it had more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM. That's disappointing. A 5060 Ti with 16, if it's priced right, could be a lot more interesting. And with the GDDR7, they're at least getting a lot more memory bandwidth, which could be a nice performance boost overall on that. Now, the overall chart that WCCF Tech is then claiming with their information so far on the 50 series looks something like this. So basically, we've got a lot of information so far about the 5080 and 5090, and a little bit less about the 5070, 5070 Ti, and even less about the 5060 and 5060 Ti. It's looking like the 5090 looks like an absolute monster with 32 gigabytes of VRAM and a bunch more cores than last time, getting that GDDR7 memory. But then the 5080 looks like it's going to be at about half of the CUDA cores of the 5090, so massively cut back on only 16 gigabytes of VRAM. But then the 5070 Ti isn't cut down much from the 5080. And then still has 16 gigabytes of GDDR7. So depending on the pricing structure, maybe the 5070 Ti could be interesting if it's priced enough lower than the 5080. Then again, we don't have a lot of information regarding the 5070. It's looking like it might be cut down quite a bit compared to the 5070 Ti. And then the 5060 and 5060 Ti, we really don't know much at all, other than, again, apparently 8 or 16 gigabytes of VRAM. Now, if some of you guys are like, why not 10 or 12 gigabytes of VRAM on a 5060? You're restricted by your memory bus. So VRAM modules require a certain amount of bit bus to connect to. So you can only slot in so many modules, which means a 128-bit bus can only fit 8 gigabytes if you have 2 gigabyte modules. Now, there's information that GDDR7 will eventually have 3 gigabyte modules, which means that 3 times 4 would get you 12 instead of 8, but all signs point to those not being ready in time for the 50 series. But that's where I'm wondering if they delayed the 5060 long enough, they could have the larger capacity modules ready to go in time for its launch. So that's what I would hope Nvidia might choose to do, because I think an 8 gigabyte card is going to be extremely disappointing if that launches at anything above $200, to be honest. People have made their feelings very clear on this with the fact that you can't buy a B580 right now. Intel just launched the B580 at 12 gigabytes, and it is sold out. Which might mean that there wasn't a lot of supply at launch. That could be another thing. But it generally got pretty favorable reviews, including from me, despite my caveat that my driver situation was still not quite as smooth as it was with AMD or Nvidia, although it was massively better than the original ARC launch. Now, with that being said, let's take a look at some meta-analysis data for the B580. So this is from 3D Center, and I've had Google Chrome, auto-translate it to English. This is a German language outlet. But I like this whenever a big launch happens. A few days later, you generally get this. So any reviewer, myself included, like I tested out over 60 different configurations, but that meant I could only factor in a few different GPUs, including the 7600, 7600 XT, 3060, and 4060. Some other outlets tested more, competitors. Also, everybody tests different games or different settings, although some are repeats. And what that means is you can then average out results from a lot of different review outlets to get a better, full picture of how these cards stack up. So what they've got here is rasterized performance at 1080p, rasterized performance at 1440p, and then they even have some 4K results, and then ray tracing performance at 1080p and 1440p. So this is pretty interesting because then if you set the B580 as the 100% baseline and then you go down to the averaged results, and again, you can see all the different outlets that they're pulling information from, you can then look at how the different cards stack up. So the B580 is definitely faster than the 7600, which only reaches 81.2% of its performance. The 7600 XT, which has 16 gigabytes of VRAM and a bit of an overclock compared to the 7600, reaches 92.1% of the performance. But again, these cost about $315, whereas the B580 is at least meant to cost $250, although like I said, can't buy one at that price right now. Hopefully supply and demand will kind of even out and they'll be come back in stock at MSRP. However, the 6700 XT, which not everybody reviewed because, as I point out in my video, harder to buy new right now, was slightly faster overall at rasterized performance. And this, by the way, I'm looking at 1440p data here. The 3060 reached only 78.7% of the B580's performance and currently sells for more if you're buying new. And the 4060 only reaches 89.1% of the performance. The 4060 Ti is faster by 11.3%. The A770, the previous generation highest powered Intel chip, only reaching 86.7% of the performance of the B580. So that's all pretty interesting stuff. You could look at the 1080p results where the numbers shift a bit, but in general, the B580 is still winning against all of the cards that are a similar price, and even some that cost more, with the exception of the 6700 XT beating it, and it has been at times available, including Black Friday, for around I think $270. Although generally it's been closer to $300 or $315 throughout much of its availability. And like I said, availability now currently kind of significantly reduced. So that's all pretty interesting. And then when you think about how it stacks up against cards like if you are looking at an AMD 6700 XT, that's all well and good, but if you do take a look at the ray tracing performance, the 6700 XT only reaches 78.2% of the B580's ray tracing performance. And the B580 is also able to match the 4060's ray tracing performance on average, and only the 4060 Ti coming out ahead in ray tracing performance. Now that being said, a caveat on ray tracing performance in general, which is that since games aren't generally fully ray traced, meaning parts of the scene are still rasterized, cards can swing wildly in how much faster the stronger ray tracing GPUs are, depending on what game you're testing and how much of any individual frame time was bottlenecked by the ray tracing calculation, if that makes sense. Anyway, so in other words, different games can vary wildly in how much faster one GPU is than another, depending on how the ray tracing is going in that game. Anyway, I still think that is pretty interesting specs, and again, goes to show why the B580 at 12 gigabytes at $250 is making things like a 5060 at 8 gigabytes pretty disappointing, depending on its price and performance levels. Now, a few other notes here. I didn't see that much new in the way of AMD GPU rumors other than this from videocards.com. They're citing their own sources, saying that PowerColor is soon to launch an RX 8000 series of GPUs that are their Reaper series. This is interesting because if you follow PowerColor, in the past, they've had a variety of GPU brandings, including Liquid Devil, Red Devil, Hellhound, Hellhound Spectral, Red Dragon, and Fighter. We've never seen a Reaper series from PowerColor. That would be new for the 8000 series. Also interesting to note with the 7000 series, it didn't look like they used their Red Dragon branding at all. They did use their Red Devil and Hellhound Spectral, but they didn't use Red Dragon. So perhaps they're phasing out Red Dragon and with Reaper. Who knows? We'll have to see what the distinction is. Usually Red Devil has been higher end than Hellhound, so perhaps, and then Fighter at the low end. So perhaps Reaper's a new high end or somewhere in between the Devil and Hellhound. I don't know. We'll have to find out, but that's at least kind of interesting. And then leave you with this little bit of a note. So John Carmack made an interesting post speculating about GPUs in the future potentially working without the need for a CPU. And you can read the full post on X. It's pretty interesting, speculating on, especially if you put the right kind of connections between them. There's certain GPU workloads that don't work well for this, especially modern rendering engines in games rely heavily on the render to texture process, which isn't well suited for multiple daisy chain GPUs. However, Carmack suggested an alternative. GPUs could be arranged in a ring topology and enhanced with explicit transfer operations, enabling both 3D rendering and machine learning frameworks to fully exploit the potential of this novel hardware setup. Anyway, you could read a little more on it. It's kind of interesting. I've been thinking about how much faster GPUs are getting because they can just go wider and more parallel, whereas CPUs seem to be having more issues generating those, same percentage gains if you compare the highest end GPU to the highest end gaming CPU. I feel like CPUs are getting a bit left in the dust. So curious about futures like this. Anyway, so I'm kind of following on those ideas. Again, you could follow up on the article for more details yourself. And then also I'll mention that we're getting more Nintendo Switch 2 rumors, this time shared by someone who claims to actually have had their hands on an actual retail model of the Nintendo Switch 2. And while that the evidence for that has not been provided publicly, and these renders are just based on the descriptions, they're not actual screenshots, they apparently did supply evidence for having the console in hand to the moderators of the subreddit where they posted their information. The summary of their information about the Nintendo Switch 2 is that its release date will be mid-March of 2025, whereas the announcement will be in January. It will come in white, gray, and game-themed, speculation most likely Mario Kart-themed, with Joy-Cons that magnetically attach with a button release mechanism, and there'll be Hall effect. That'll be good news for all the people who, like me, who got severe Joy-Con drift and had to continually send them in for a replacement. USB will apparently be 2 Type-C connectors this time instead of 1. I think they originally had 1. An 8-inch LCD screen, notice no OLED model. I would imagine an OLED update might come out later again. It's a shame there's not one available at launch apparently. But the price is just guesswork, so I wouldn't read too much into that. And they're saying the dock has a rounder design, might have a fan, and would have up to 4K 30 support. And 4K on a Nintendo Switch 2, well, the idea is that this has Nvidia hardware, which should support potentially some version of DLSS, maybe even its own lightweight version. That's just speculation. But that could potentially enable those higher resolution outputs, which could be interesting. All right, guys, that's what I've got for you today. Let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments. Links to everything in this, all the sources and whatnot in the video description. And a huge thank you to viewers, commenters, subscribers, and especially channel members who click the join button to directly support the channel financially. That is amazing. Huge thank you to you guys. And if you guys are interested, you can look at the join button down below to see what kind of little perks are available and all that as a thank you. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.